Just a lot of gratitude. I mean, I thought I'd be, riding the pine the whole year, and things happen, and thankful to God for giving me the opportunity. And to come out here in a hostile environment, like you said, and to get a win is to push us forward and bring the guys together.
I know you said you were working on your resume this offseason. This is something that you can add to the resume, winning here at Lumen Field.
Hopefully so, yeah.
Last night, it became your typical Steelers game of old. Najee Harris gets 11 missed tackles, 8 technically plus 3 on a second touchdown. Jaylen Warren makes 6 broken tackles on 1 singular play. Pittsburgh dominated the time of possession battle and did 2 things they've struggled all year long with: converting in the red zone and converting on third down. A big talking point was Mason Rudolph starting for a second straight week. First, the Bengals post 290 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. It wasn't a perfect game, missing a shot to Calvin Austin, getting hit on a near touchdown throw to Deontay Johnson, but he was shaking off rust, having not played in over 2 years. If anything, he showed the arm talent to make high-level throws, pushing the ball downfield. But last night was different. Mason Rudolph was the highest graded Steeler per PF, and watching the game, it reflected he was clearly the best quarterback we've had over the last 3 years. 2 things stood out specifically to me. Number 1, the arm talent. Rudolph coming out the 2018 draft was a big pocket passer with the arm strength to push the ball 45 yards down the field, but the ball placement was always an issue with him, especially in his 2019 season. After being knocked out on a late hit by Earl Thomas, he just was not very accurate, with his completion percentage dropping from 66 to 56%. Last night, he completed 75% of his passes, and 2 plays were really noteworthy. Were under pressure, he hung tall in the pocket, not affected by the blitz, even a defender right in his face at point-blank range, delivering throws down the field to George Pickens, who finishes with over 130 yards for a second straight week. It feels pretty good, because all year long with Kenny Pickett, we saw the same repeated issues which were never corrected after his rookie season. Bailing out of messy pockets, bailing out of clean pockets, it didn't matter. But the worst part about it was when he would miss reads, then get injured. Versus the Texans, he scrambled into a defender and injured his knee. Versus the Cardinals, playing on ankle injury, he has a wide open Calvin Austin on his final read, but he doesn't get through his progressions, tries to scramble, re-aggravates his ankle, and then he's out the next 4 to 6 weeks. With Mason Rudolph, he runs only when he needs to. Last week had a nice third down conversion because he did a John Elway helicopter, and that was a nice spectacle when Mitch Trubisky a week before slid 3 yards in front of the marker instead. Meanwhile, with Mason, not only does he push the ball down the field vertically, he's actually getting better after years sitting underneath Ben Roethlisberger. It's not surprising how that works. And while last week over half of Mason's yards came after the catch with George Pickens running by defenders, yesterday versus the Seahawks, it was him making the consistently right read. And I felt like his pocket presence reminded me a little bit of a draft prospect from this last year in Will Levis. At times, he's going to take a third down sack, but you like to see the patience and feel to navigate the messy pressure. And while Rudolph did not throw any touchdowns, the important part was that he had no turnovers, with a near interception on the first drive of the game, but it was more on Deontay Johnson. If Mason Rudolph is taking care of the football with 0 turnovers in his last 2 starts, while bringing the explosive shot making down the field consistently, which Kenny Pickett did invariably, he is the best quarterback right now on the team. Mitch Trubisky was awful, and it gave me the impression that maybe all of these quarterbacks are just being failed by the coaching staff because none of them are playing well. But Mason just came off the pine and actually is playing just like he did in 2019. People forget, in his first 4 starts, Pittsburgh averaged 25 points per game in that season. But without Antonio Brown, when Juju Smith-Schuster got hurt and Nick Van Nett was his tight end 1, Mason started to struggle again after being knocked out versus the Ravens. He had 2 bad games in Ohio on the road as a de facto rookie quarterback, somebody that Hall of Fame quarterback Ben Roethlisberger never embraced. In fact, went out of his way to make uncomfortable. His run game was not very good. The offensive line was aging and average. The weapons were not very good, and his number 1 wide receiver that year was James Washington, his college teammate. Now for Mason, getting to play alongside George Pickens, the Steelers are finally doing the thing. In the 5 games George Pickens this year has had 100 yards or more, the Steelers have won every single time. And the reason why he's been successful in these games is the offensive line and quarterback are just doing their job. And when you do that, Pickens is going to make enough plays for us to beat the likes of the Browns, Ravens, Rams, Bengals when they're 8-6, and now a Seahawks team that may have fallen to 8-8, but is also very competitive at that record. Last week, his 195 yards on 4 catches underscored he is A.J. Brown. Before we get back to George Pickens, because I just compared him to a top 5 receiver a minute ago, I want to continue to talk about Mason Rudolph. When Mitch Trubisky played brutal football in his first 3 games as QB2, Mason patiently awaited his opportunity, knowing he may never get again. Starting at quarterback in the NFL is not always given a second or third time. Rudolph still said all the right things that even when his teammates did not, highlighted maturity. And he has made the most out of an opportunity no other NFL team was willing to give him the previous few off seasons. It's been a breath of fresh air watching Rudolph, who had those growing pains early in his career, stuck around, never giving up. Maybe that's the theme for 2024. Mason Rudolph was hated in Pittsburgh and a punching bag league-wide. After 2 weeks of 275 plus yards, completing 70% of his passes, Mike Tomlin would then later reveal Kenny Pickett is ready to go for Week 18, but they will be rolling with Mason under center. Is this the right decision? Yes. I've always felt like ankle injuries are the type of thing you have to be 100% back from. If you're at 90%, the chance of re-injury or playing with limited mobility is not worth it. That's somebody that played basketball his entire life, so maybe it's a little bit different when you're coming off of surgery playing football. But as a quarterback, the ankle is pretty important with your footwork in the pocket. Baltimore could sit their starters next week with a bye week, but given they have a bye, I don't know if they want to have 2 weeks of rust moving into the second round of the playoffs, given they've not done anything there yet. There's a chance Baltimore plays the majority of their defensive players, so you're going to want the best chance to win. It's pretty clear Mason Rudolph brings the explosiveness, the security, and the moxie. Everything that Kenny Pickett brings and what he doesn't do. Now, people are going to rush to conclusions, though. I already know what the angry commenters are going to say. John, you're giving up on your quarterback. It's not true. It's being objective without being a fan of a player. If George Pickens is being outplayed by Allen Robinson, I'm going to say it. It is true Kenny played very well versus the Bengals, the team that last week, Mason, probably looked a little bit worse while playing. Now, breaking reports have come out that Kenny Pickett reportedly, important to note, per The Athletic, refused to back up Mason Rudolph during last week's game. The 2021 first-round pick was then made inactive, with Rudolph named this week's starter. And I can understand why Kenny Pickett would be frustrated. After undergoing a tightrope surgery to get back into the field sooner, Pittsburgh was rushing him back, and so Pickett did self his thing as that competitive player who wants to be available for his teammates and his coaches. So when you see him giving one-word answers in press conferences and maybe looking a bit expressionless in the sidelines, I feel 2 things can be true. Currently, Mason Rudolph is the Steelers' best quarterback. At the same time, the Steelers' coaching staff and organization are responsible for his lack of development over the last year. The play calling was abysmal, the pass protection shaky, with an injured Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth earlier in the year. And honestly, Pickett still played fairly well right before getting hurt versus the Bengals and Cardinals, making it understandable he would be so frustrated with how the organization has handled his recent injury. This could be the beginning of the end for Kenny Pickett. When your backup steps in and not only outperforms you, but shapeshifts the team's offense after being a punching bag the last 3 years, it can not only crush your confidence, but it can damage your reputation. We talked about Kenny Pickett's struggles, and they came down to 3 things. He was like Derek Carr in the red zone. Really looked like he forgot how to play at times, and his pocket presence was not good, taking quarterback sacks which were beyond the offensive line struggles. The third thing was his crippling inaccuracy and his ball placement, which did regress. That part is inexcusable because Pickett has average tools. And when looking around the NFL, quarterbacks with below average arms have to be great everywhere else, like a Brock Purdy, a Tua, Jalen Hurts. If those talents, like a Mason or Jordan Love on a grander scale, then take care of the football, Kenny Pickett just looks like a spot starter who at times can win you a game, but caps your offense because of his insufficiencies and inconsistent play. I'm not going to overanalyze just 2 games versus the Bengals and Seahawks, but in 12 games this year, the most points the Steelers scored was 24 against the Rams. It's even harder to defend the quarterback when he's left 25% of his games injured and missed another 7. Last year, I felt like the concussions, which are a hard part of football, were maybe just a blimp on the radar, but they're a sign of what to come. Maybe Kenny Pickett can't handle the rigors of being a consistent pocket passer, and if that's the case, he could just be Tyrod Taylor and not Alex Smith or Derek Carr. The Tyrod Taylor comparison is pretty fair for their skill sets, but it's not necessarily to bash a first-round pick. The more I think about it, a comparison like Alex Smith is attainable for Kenny if everything clicked with a better head coach. And overall, I just think Mason Rudolph deserves an apology as a good spot starter. With how well he is playing, a good performance by the Ravens could play him off of Pittsburgh's team. As for what happens this offseason, we'll get to that in a bit. We want to highlight the other parts of the team because it was not just a solo act by the quarterback position, far from. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren play their best games collectively. Najee breaking over 10 tackles, a third straight Week 17 he posts over 100 yards, this time with 2 touchdowns. He could have had a third in the final minute, but slid to seal the game. And his first touchdown was really just your angry type of run. You've got Devin Bush swinging for a ghost. I don't know who he was going at. Harris finishes this matchup with 27 carries for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Could have had a third in the final minute, while Jaylen Warren finishes with 13 carries, a super efficient 6 yards per carry, including one where he broke 6 tacklers, almost channeling his inner Marshawn Lynch if he could have broke off the last one. With Harris, it's the third straight Week 17 where he posts over 100 yards. Unlike last year, he had 2 touchdowns, and every year the trend is Najee struggles early. Then late in the year, he finds the power, which in college made him a superstar running back. Speaking of running backs, Jaylen Warren might be my third favorite player on the Steelers. The vision he has to make cutbacks gives him open lanes that Najee does not always see or consistently take. Once Jaylen hits an open gap, he's free for an explosive 8 to 10 to 25 yard gain. It's Austin Eckler light, a comparison I made after hearing it earlier in the year. People said, oh no, way too soon. But the contact balance, footwork, and motor he brings to keep runs alive when the defense thinks they got him reminds me of the running back who's led the NFL in touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. I really enjoy watching Jaylen play, especially with how well he fits the Steelers tradition. He can be a 3-down back, great in pass protection. Today, it was Stonewall and Devin Bush. I would argue right now he's in the perfect role. I don't want to see any running back get 25 carries. With Najee, I'd like to see that split be divided a little bit more evenly, but he's a chip on the old block, bringing that competitive fire Hines Ward has, where you're always looking over your shoulder and secure that someone is coming to take your job. That's the best way to always stay uncomfortable. As an undrafted free agent running back, just like his cousin, that's the report by Alex Kozora, he's cousins with Willie Parker. I believe Jaylen Warren needs to be a Steeler for life. Not only does he bring the Hines Ward competitive stamina, and that's a very high bar here in Pittsburgh, but he brings the clever misdirection, the very subtle explosive running that Le'Veon provided out of thin air, that he brings the best of different Steelers stars in the past. Pittsburgh is lucky to have this guy because they're paying him less than $1 million, even next season, and he should exactly be a Steeler for as long as possible. And to wrap up the offensive discussion, it was very unique to see just 4 Steelers get a reception. George Pickens, great day. Deontay, 75 yards. Pat Freiermuth, a big third down conversion. When we're down 14-10 in the second quarter, he has an explosive 15 to 25 yard reception. And then Jaylen Warren, of course. Now, this is where I want to give a tip of the cap to head coach Mike Tomlin. 2 weeks ago, right before their loss versus the Colts, I recorded a video on whether or not he should be the Steelers coach next year. But in that video, I highlighted just how bad the coaching has been, to be specific. And over the last 2 weeks, the Steelers have done a very good job cobbling together their defense while also using the talents on their offense. I know a lot of Tomlin defenders out there pleased he finally got over that 500 benchmark again this year. As a Steeler fan, I don't care about how high their floor is. I really am just looking to see the ceiling improve. Mike Tomlin has done a wonderful job with the defense. You look at just how much they've been beaten. To lose your top 3 linebackers, Cole Holcomb, Quan Alexander, and Landon Roberts, is brutal. Then losing your top 3 safeties, top 4, Minkah, Keanu Neal, DeMonte Casey, who wasn't playing very well, Trenton Thompson, Elijah Riley, actually your top 5. Pittsburgh last week would have to play Miles Jack off the streets, kind of in that sub-safety position, with newcomers Eric Rowe and a converted cornerback and 12-year pro in Patrick Peterson. Pittsburgh has had to do a lot of juggling and shifting in the positions in the back end, and Joey Porter yesterday did not play particularly well against DK Metcalf. In fact, it was his worst game. After Patrick Peterson got off to a very poor start, people like me were very disappointed. The Steelers let go of Mike Hilton and Cam Sutton to bring this guy in at 33 years old, but in the second half of the year, Peterson has been actually one of the better players in football. He is, by PF, top 10 in the lowest completion percentage allowed, with a variety of big plays and interceptions. Had a big pass breakup in the fourth quarter to seal this win on DK Metcalf. Eric Rowe comes in off the streets, and he's been a big part of our run defense. And then before him, it was Trenton Thompson, who was off the practice squad, making plays in coverage. It seems like Pittsburgh's secondary has done a good job, even when Minka is hurt. And at the linebacker position, I'm not going to lie to you, it looks like these guys are brought off the street. Miles Jack is a great leader, very likable, respectable player. But watching Mykal Walker and Jack play, it does seem like they're running in quicksand a bit at times in coverage. Walker does not look like a natural linebacker, more of like a see and hit type of player, not really somebody with the instincts. But you've also got to be patient with these guys because it's so late in the year. They didn't have a normal training camp. And quite frankly, they're not entering that flow state yet in such a new environment. The hope is Atlanta Roberts gets back healthy so that these players can just be rotational. It's like, if we could have just taken care of business versus the Cardinals, maybe Mason plays when we win that game, we'd have the same record as the Chiefs right now. We'd have a playoff spot. If we then beat the 2-1 Patriots, we'd be an 11-win team. And if we didn't get blown out by all three rookie coaches we played this year, it would give me a feeling of relief that Mike Tomlin is the guy long term. But it's the games and the wins like this, which come a daily a dollar short, that I'm not going to celebrate. Why would you celebrate this having watched the last month of Steelers football? You can't. Because the truth is, and I'm going to get to their defense in a second. I'm going to get to Nick Herbig. I'm going to get to TJ Watt. I don't want to be pessimistic, but this season for the Steelers feels like a failure because they've beaten many good teams. Everybody wants to talk, though, about how tough the AFC is. They've beaten the Ravens and the Browns. They've almost competed with the Jaguars. This is a team which could have stepped in when the door was wide open, but instead, they hit their head on the doorframe. Having beaten so many good teams, they could be 12-4. They could be 13-3 if they took care of business, making adjustments before it was a bit too late. Coordinator, Mason over Mitch. Offensive line playing so poorly. How is it an issue when it's the 7th most expensive, more expensive than Philadelphia? Some people say, look at what Tomlin's done with talentless rosters, despite having 3 or 4 lethal weapons. A third 9-win season should not be celebrated, unless a playoff win is attached. At some point, TJ Watt won't be the reigning defensive player of the year, and you won't have a litany of defensive superstars to puzzle together insane wins they had no business being in, and then you're going to feel like kind of wasted these years with all of the money invested into that defense, with so many good players on great contracts like Jalen Warren, George Pickens, Pat Fryerman. I feel like the Steelers should, quite frankly, be better than this. And as a fan, I can be more critical knowing that so many games could have gone a lot differently. Talking about good contracts, one player on the Steelers defense has been a star this year that no one knows about, and his name is Nick Herbig. Herbig is one of the most productive players so far as a rookie, and he's somebody I was super excited about coming out of preseason. He seals this game with a swim move to split a chip block, leading to a strip sack on Geno Smith, our 4th edge rusher, who has 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles, while playing just 17% of the team reps. I mean, he's a rookie in the NFL, getting hardly any opportunity, battling a longtime veteran in Marcus Golden, who is our 3rd edge rusher. And he is actually a pretty good player too. I love Wisconsin defenders. I'm a fan of Keanu Benton, but I love guys that work with TJ Watt as well. And after practice, it surely has your perks to iron your sword alongside. Shoutouts go out to Larry Njobi, who has 11 pressures over the last 3 weeks, and Alex Highsmith, who last night had a team-high 7 pressures. Credit to Nick Faribault over on Twitter. Now, with all that being said, it's time to get negative. The cons of the day. Joey Porter Jr., as we shared, did not play a very good game. His matchup was probably his first big loss as a guy that's beaten Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. He's handled Marquise Brown. Our linebackers, again, really do look like they stand no chance in coverage. And Next week, the Ravens, maybe they'll spare us by playing Tyler Huntley. Even still, doesn't mean you overlook them. The Steelers lost them with Robert Griffin back 4 years ago. And while I've been really happy to see Mason Rudolph playing well, he didn't miss a second touchdown for a second week. Last week it was the Calvin Austin slightly underthrown. This week, Jaylen Warren was open on what would have been a walk-in touchdown. I did highlight this with Kenny Pickett. It's only fair we do with Mitch and Mason. And he just didn't get through his progressions in time and did take a third down sack. I am going to live with it because the Steelers are posting 30 points in back-to-back games. They have not posted over 24 points before Mason came into the lineup. To complete nearly 70% of your passes while throwing for 280 yards a game is a treat right now. With all that being said, have a happy new year and go Steelers.